Hello, beautiful friends, and welcome to the Random Creative. So I finally watched the 2019 movie Joker with Joaquin Phoenix and Robert De Niro because I'm always late to the game when it comes to movies. But the sequel's coming out here soon, so I figured, well, I might as well get caught up on everything, and boy, am I glad I did. This movie tells the dark, gritty, and disturbing origin story of the titular character and just how he came to, quote, get these scars, if you will. I cannot even put into words how much I absolutely loved this movie. Deep down, I'm still just a little goth girl that loves all things dark and spooky and who has just a little bit of a villain obsession. I admit it. And this totally appealed to my love of dark and grisly anti-hero stories. I mean, The Crow has remained one of my favorite movies of all time for a reason, and that's only partially because Brandon Lee looks really good in it. Side note, I wrote this script out before realizing they were making yet another movie of The Crow with Bill Skarsgård, and I gotta be real, guys, I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, I really like Skarsgård, I think he's a really brilliant actor. I don't know if he fits The Crow. I don't know. We'll see. I'm gonna try to remain cautiously optimistic, and obviously I'm still gonna watch it when it comes out, but I don't know, I'm not holding my breath on this one. We'll see. But anyway, now just to clarify, I've never really been a reader of Western comics. I know, I'm sorry. So I can't really tell you whether or not this is close to like the original lore or anything like that. I don't know why, but I never really got into Marvel or DC comics. I mainly read manga because that was the art style I preferred. Even though I know a lot of the Western comics had really, really good storylines, I couldn't get into it. I'm sorry. However, the Joker has remained one of my favorite villains and just characters in general for many decades, but my perspective is based mostly on television cartoon series, live action movies, and the like. My opinion comes mainly from a storyteller's point of view. As someone who's written several books and short stories, I really value good character design and coherent plots. And for my personal taste, this movie hit on all of them. Now, to be fair, I am very much driven by strong characters in general and just good character development. I will literally watch an entire anime series, regardless of how many episodes it may drone on for, provided there is at least one character that I love. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Inuyasha. I devoured that entire story for Sesshomaru alone, and you know what? I don't regret it. So first and foremost, I definitely want to give credit where credit is due in praising Joaquin Phoenix and his brilliant portrayal of this character. I mean, up to this point, my favorite rendition of the Joker was Heath Ledger's now classic performance in The Dark Knight. Granted, I might be a little biased because I had a huge fangirl crush on Heath Ledger, but he was also just one of my favorite actors of all time. I, like many of my generation, was absolutely devastated by his tragic and untimely death. However, I gotta say, Phoenix gives Ledger a run for his money in this movie by bringing about the more human side of the character. And, I kind of like to think that Ledger would have really enjoyed this rendition and probably would have praised his fellow actor because that's just the kind of guy he was. I mean, let's be real. Heath was awesome. In this movie, we get to see the Joker as a real person who's just trying to fit in with society, who even has a noble goal of wanting to make people laugh. But because his mind works differently than everyone around him, he just can't seem to make the connection that he just so desperately longs for. Now, you combine that with the cruelty of everyday interactions and the betrayal of those most close to him, you have a character with pretty incredible motivation. Slowly, these changes take place until eventually you have the most dangerous type of villain there is, the one who has nothing left to lose. And the tragedy of his character is that so much of his social awkwardness was brought about by years of trauma from his childhood and suppressed memories. What's perhaps the most chilling part of this type of character, specifically when it is the villain, is that the average person can understand them to an extent, and even see how they make sense a little bit. Now, as someone who has dealt with mental health issues literally my entire life, I know firsthand what it feels like to be misunderstood or unheard. I mean, Not to the extent that I want to, unalive someone, granted, but you get my point. We can empathize with Arthur because many people have been bullied in their lifetimes or mistreated. So there's almost a strange sense of satisfaction at seeing what feels like justice, even though deep down you know the way he went about it was really wrong. I was also fortunate enough to not have this movie spoiled for me at all, which meant that the ending scene where Joker is being interviewed by Robert De Niro's character was something that came as a complete shock. The brilliance of how this scene was set up was that it really put the audience watching the movie from their living room or in the theater in the same position as the movie's TV audience, which was pretty gut-wrenching. But again, that's what makes this such good storytelling. This was a great example of having something shocking happen that wasn't just for the sake of being shocking a la Game of Thrones. It's a moment where you see the Joker actually come to life. That moment where Arthur is no longer himself, but the persona that he's created. If he can't make the world laugh, he'll make them pay for his misery instead. And that's pretty chilling. And perhaps what was the most disturbing and thought-provoking fact is that when you hear his final speech, he low-key makes sense. I mean, that's one of the reasons I felt Thanos was such an incredible villain for the third Marvel phase. Now, again, I'm basing this only on the movies and not the comic books, but I remember very distinctly feeling slightly disturbed that when Thanos explains why he has to end half of humanity, I kinda hate that this makes sense. Morally, we know this isn't the way to accomplish what he's trying to do, but in his viewpoint, it's the only way to save humanity. As the famous quote goes, every villain is a hero in his own mind. For the Joker, this was the only alternative he had after a lifetime of heartache. I think that's why I've been a little disappointed by some of the latest movies and TV shows that have come out, specifically in the last few years. And their villains, and I guess for the character design in general, it just kind of feels like everyone's kind of generic, no one has any real motivation, and everything that happens in the plot is just conveniently placed to allow the characters to move forward in the story. So instead of the story happening to them and them living it out, they just kind of say their lines and then go to the next plot point. It makes me sad to see how different cinema and even the literary world has changed in the last decade or so. I mean, Joker is only 4 years old, but the difference between cinematic storytelling is pretty drastic. Whatever the case, I will say I thoroughly enjoyed this dark piece of art, and I know it's not going to be for everyone just because of how graphic it is and because it can be triggering for those who struggle with mental health disorders. I'm still eagerly looking forward to the sequel, and I really hope the writers have kept to the storyline and the world that they've created, because it's pretty amazing. But hey, those are just my thoughts. What are yours? Did you love this movie, or did you hate it? Do you have any other suggestions for movies, shows, or anime series like this with great villains or character arcs or origin stories? I would totally love to check them out and give my thoughts on them. If you would like to support me or the channel, feel free to check out my photography over at Instagram and maybe take a look at my young adult novel, The Isle of Never. Both are going to be linked down below. The Isle of Never is basically a reimagining of the world of Neverland, but with a few twists and turns and a very handsome Captain Hook. See, I told you. Villain obsession. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next one.